Hi, welcome back, class. Today we're going to talk about definition of basic belief. We've been talking about religion, the definition of religion, and we said religion is the belief or set of beliefs we use to give meaning to experience. Now we're going to talk about what those basic beliefs are. There are two, and I'll have to show you how we got there. And the core question I think I'm going to ask from this, there are several actually. I'm going to ask you to show me the argument. What is the argument that something must be eternal? What is the argument that something must be eternal? We'll go over the answer to that in a moment. And then I will ask you, what are the basic beliefs under all is eternal? And we'll find those here and I'll explain them. And what are the basic beliefs under only some is eternal? And I'll define those. So 3 core questions coming from number 2 on the handout. So you can see how it's an outline. Now let's talk about basic belief, and I'll show you how we got there's only 2, and something must be eternal. This is a little bit of philosophy we're going to do, but belief systems are based on philosophy. So the first point, our most basic belief has to do with our most basic concept. And our most basic concept is existence. So what's the most basic thing you can say about this? You're going to say, it's an Apple Pencil, it's white, it's plastic. It has to exist first though, right? It is. It has to exist in order to be white or plastic or an Apple Pencil. So existence, and there's 2 kinds of existence. Always and not always. Let me try that again. Always and not always, or eternal and temporal. Perhaps we should write down some terms because we're going to be using these terms throughout the semester and I want you to know them. So let's go to the iPad. Here are some basic terms, definitions I want you to know as an educated person for the rest of your life. Let's talk about eternal. Eternal means no beginning and no end. No beginning and no end. So it's always existing. A corollary concept that goes with that is temporal. And temporal means had a beginning. Minimally, had a beginning. So it's not always. Now there's another concept we'll see in some religions that is a version of temporal that's called everlasting. And everlasting says it has a beginning but has no end. Okay, like in the theistic religions, we'll see that the soul has a beginning, but the soul continues forever. That's everlasting. So we have these concepts now. Put them in your notes. Eternal and temporal concepts. Okay. We also want to talk about matter and spirit. We're doing a bit of metaphysics right now. This is the area of philosophy that talks about what is real. Matter is something that has size. Sometimes philosophers say extended, and is not conscious. Where conscious is self-awareness. So think of an atom. Proton, neutron, electron. Is it self-aware? Is it thinking? No. So matter has size, is extended, it can be measured, and it's not conscious. Now, matter also has energy. People sometimes talk about energy as if it's spirit, but energy is an aspect of matter, and we know that because we know E equals mc squared, or energy is mass times the speed of light squared, so it's an aspect of the material world. It can be measured. The concept that goes with matter, its opposite is spirit. Spirit has no size and is conscious, self-aware. Now, spirit is a concept we don't like to think about, but if you're thinking about it, right? Or are you a spirit? That's one of the questions religion answers, right? Is there matter? Is there spirit? Is there both? Could there be neither? I don't think so. All right, so these have been called substances. Substance. Okay, and these are modes of existing for substance, okay? Now, we're going to see what happens, and this is what's so neat about humans. They combine these. What happens when you combine these? When you combine these, we like to play with logical options. And in the history of human thought and philosophy and religion, we have tried on all the options, and not all of them can be true. We have to find the true option. So let's go back to our handout and see what happens when we combine these options. That's not what I'm looking for, is it? That is not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is this. Okay, so we're talking about our most basic belief has to do with our most basic concept, that of existence, and that of eternal existence. Now we defined eternal, and the next line says there are two basic beliefs. All is eternal, everything is eternal, and only some is eternal. Now, how did we get that? The next line says, none is eternal, cannot be held, since it implies being came from non-being. Well, let's talk about that. Let's go back to the iPad, and we're going to use a tool from logic called the square of opposition to look at our logical options when it comes to basic beliefs. And I will set up the square for you. Perhaps you've seen this in another class. It's a tool that Aristotle gives us for analyzing our options. Each of the lines represents a different relationship between judgments. Judgments are sentences. We could put our beliefs into sentences, and we can test them to see if they're true or false. So we're going to use the square to look at a particular sentence about eternal existence. So this corner is going to give us the option that all is eternal. Maybe all, everything is eternal in some form or another. The contradiction is represented by this diagonal. Contradiction. The diagonal is the exact opposite. Now, what would be the exact opposite of all is eternal? I know you're thinking none is eternal. That's not it. Some is not eternal. Some is not eternal. Okay, so the opposite of all is some is not. None is eternal goes here, though. None is eternal is the contrary of the all statement. Contrary. Now, what happens with the two top contrary positions is they can both be false in logic. So what's the statement we're left with? What's the contradiction of none is eternal? Let's put this CTD means contradiction. What's the contradiction of none is eternal? Use your thinking. Some is eternal. Something is eternal. Now we have all four options. And on our handout, we're saying no to this option. But why? Now I'm going to give you the core question. What is the argument that something must be eternal? And let me show you something cool about this square. Based on the laws of reason, contradictions A and non-A can't both be true at the same time. And some is eternal and none is eternal are contradictions, so they can't both be true at the same time. So if this statement is true, then this one must be false. But we really can't prove the truth of this one directly. But maybe we can prove that this one's false. How can we do that? We're going to use reason as a test for meaning. Remember we talked about reason is the test for meaning. We're going to use reason to test the meaning of this statement, none is eternal. Now I need a little more space to write. And I'm going to answer the question by writing in blue under this none is eternal. All right, so none is eternal means what? None is eternal means all is non-eternal. What's the opposite of eternal? Temporal. All is temporal. And what does temporal mean? We just defined it. It means it had a beginning. So this means all had a beginning. Which means all came into being. But if every single thing came into being, let's say this came into being, this did, this did, this did, this did, this did, where did this first one come from? There's nothing before it. So where did it come from? All came into being from non-being. Now think about that for a moment. Does that make sense? What is non-being? Have you ever thought about being and non-being? This is the first question of philosophy. What is being? Being is something that exists. It has properties, like the table has the properties of being solid, being wood. And the table will probably continue to exist into the future. It has the power to be. There's a power in being. Now let's talk about what is non-being. What is non-being? Do you have any non-being? Is there non-being in your pocket? No. There's lint in your pocket. Non-being, I'm going to use a negation side. Okay, this little tilde is a negation, not. So non-being does not exist. It does not have properties. And it has no power. No power to be. Okay, so can you get being, which has these qualities, from non-being? Is that possible? Can something that has no power give rise to power? No. It's logically impossible, it's meaningless, and it's ontologically impossible. It can't be. So that is why we're going to say this corner is not an option. Now you might want to test it out, play with it. I had to when I was a student. I had to think about it a lot. See, is that right? Now I will let you work it out, but the answer to the question that I'm going to ask is here, okay? So the question, again, I will ask, what is the argument that something must be eternal? Something exists always. Now this isn't just something you learn in school. This is a statement about reality. So you should think deeply about it. This should kind of blow you away. To go, oh my goodness, there's something out there that's been there forever. What could it be? Well, that's what the religions are talking about. That's what they're looking for. What is this eternal thing? Okay, the answer, okay, so you're going to tell me on a note card, and you're going to put it in your long-term memory and know it forever. Some is eternal is true because the contradiction, none is eternal, is false because it means all is temporal, all had a beginning, all came into being from non-being, which is impossible. All right, impossible. So I do want what's in blue. Maybe I need to clean this up because I think it's covered up by the picture now, isn't it? Let's go like this, and we'll say this violates the laws the laws of thought or reason. So it's not a viable option. It's meaningless. Okay, nobody believes none is eternal. In all the world's religions and all the philosophical systems, nobody thinks none is eternal. Maybe there's some grad student out there playing with the idea, but how can he live this idea? Anyway, I'll let you play with it and think about the meaning of it. For now, though, we are going to erase this option, okay? You've taken notes. I'm going to erase a lot of stuff here now. You can pause and rewind if you need to go back and get that. We're going to get rid of all this mess. And in fact, it's not a mess. It's beautiful because it's making less work for us now. All right, so I erased some is not eternal. But we need that back now. So we know this corner is true because nothing is eternal is false. But given the laws of the square, we don't know if these two are true together, because if all is eternal is true, then some is eternal is true too. So these two could be true together. We don't know. So the other option is that these two may be true together too. Some is eternal and some is not eternal. At this point, we don't know. So what we want to do is get a new contradiction, and we do that by combining some is eternal with some is not eternal, and we'll have a combination some is and some is not, which is to say only some is eternal. All right, now we can take off some of this. Some is plus some is not equals only some is eternal. And these two views, all is eternal and only some is eternal, are now a new contradiction. Both cannot be true and both cannot be false. So we have two possible basic beliefs. Everything in some form or another is eternal, or only some things are eternal. And guess what? All of the world's religions fit into those two basic beliefs. So I'm going to go back to the handout. And if you look, none is eternal, cannot be held, since it implies being came from non-being. We said that's not possible, so we erased it. Point 4. Under all is eternal are the following religions. Let's talk about this. If you go back to the square, in philosophical terms, possibly all that exists is matter. We'll call that material, can't spell, material monism. All that exists is matter, and matter is eternal. There is no spirit. Okay, that's one option. Perhaps we can look at spiritual monism. Spiritual monism says there is one thing, mono, and it's eternal, and it's spirit, consciousness. There is no matter. That's another option. And then there's dualism, which is two things. Matter and spirit are co-eternal. So remember, we defined matter and spirit. Now we're seeing how they can be combined with eternal. Maybe matter's all that exists and it's eternal. Maybe spirit's all that it exists and it's eternal. Maybe there's two things that are eternal. Logical options, right? Under only some is eternal, we have theism, which says God is eternal. God creates, he's the eternal one. And God rules in the creation. That would be the Abrahamic religions. Or maybe we go with deism. I hope you can see that. God creates and does not rule. So he creates it, sets it up, but he doesn't interact. That's a logical option as well, right? So here are the philosophies when we talk about basic beliefs that undergird the religions. Now we can go back to the handout and see how those philosophies get developed into religions. And this is what I want you to know. Second core question from this section of the handout. What are the basic beliefs under all is eternal? And so we'll see them. Secular humanism says all is matter and matter is eternal. There is no spirit or soul. Hinduism says all is one. Atman, the self, is Brahman, ultimate reality. We'll talk about that. Advaita Vedanta is the world is Maya or illusion. So what appears to our senses as matter is not real. It's an illusion. All is consciousness, all is mind. Buddhism's going to say there's neither matter nor spirit that's eternal. There's just a process of change. So what appears to us is constantly changing and in motion. So they're going to say all is dukkha or suffering. All is an eternal process. Suffering arises from that eternal process of change. Dualism says matter and spirit are both eternal, and there are Greek forms of dualism like Plato and Aristotle, Persian Zoroastrianism, Indian Samkhya Yoga, Latter-day Saints, and we'll look at some of those. Taoism is going to be more, Taoism, Confucianism, and Shintoism is going to be more focused on nature. They're less interested in this question about what is eternal, more interested in ethics. You can read about those in your textbook. And shamanism is belief in spirits and nature and magical powers. They aren't going to develop the metaphysics as much, and it depends on what religion we're looking at. Sometimes there's a high God behind everything. Okay, then under only some is eternal, or God the Creator, are the following religions. Judaism, and there's several divisions within Judaism that we'll talk about. Orthodox, Reformed, Conservative, Reconstruction, and Hasidic Judaism. Christianity, which is divided again into Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Protestant Christianity. Islam, which has Sunni, Shia, and Sufi branches. And then deism, which is more of a philosophy than a religion, I'm going to say. God created the world but does not actively rule in the world. So these are the basic beliefs. Okay, so what we talked about today was the square of opposition. We put the basic beliefs on the square. I gave you the argument that something must be eternal. And then we went on to see what the positions are under each of those two options. And I want you to know what are the positions under all is eternal, what religions, and what are the religions under only some is eternal. So 3 note cards coming out of number 2. I'm going to pause here, and next time we will talk about the definition of God in different religions, and we'll talk about levels of religion. So I look forward to talking again soon. Have a great day.